We're going to talk now about Generation Z and to what extent are they changing what we know about leaderships. They are rewriting everything we know about leadership. They are challenging norms. And I would love to welcome our speakers to the stage. Oduwole, CEO of Alajo, Nigeria. Kupu, of course, the global head of Zoho for startups. I would like also to welcome, please, to welcome Srijan, co-founder and CTO of Fuze UAE, and Shreya, sustainability and climate activist. Thank you so much all for joining us. Please join me at the stage here. Can we give them all a round of applause?
One person's online. Yeah, online. Yes. Hi.
Okay, another great discussion, and I would like also, of course, to thank Shreya for joining us online. Thank you so much. I hope that you can hear us. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sure you can hear us loud and clear. Okay, but we cannot hear you. Can you just unmute? Just because I have to make sure. Yes, that's perfect. Okay, so I would like to start with a question to all of you, and I would love to hear your thoughts around it. So I remember 20 or 30 years ago, young people in Generation Z did not have a great role when it comes to startups. And today, it's a whole different level. So what, in your opinion, guided this environment and motivated Gen Z to play a greater role in startups? I would love to start with you.
Sure. We live in a world where you can make money by talking on podcasts. You can make money by selling tables for reels. You can make money by selling virtual real estate in the metaverse. Try explaining to my parents that I make a living out of talking, literally talking, something that I love doing. For them, it's like, saying, hey, I've built a career or something that I got scolded for in school. I used to, get kicked out of the classroom, and here I am, building a career out of it. So it's wild. The opportunities, of course, the digital age has created these opportunities, and they're full of promise. But at the same time, I feel like there is that challenge in accepting these roles. There is still a lag. Like, sure, we've broken out of traditional barriers, but we're also navigating traditional mindsets. There is an acceptance. It's not just about societies, but also our families, for that matter. I mean, try explaining to your relatives, even from, imagine telling someone 20 years ago that being a TikTok creator, or being an AI whisperer, or being a meme curator, these are legitimate jobs. So it's difficult, I think, because we're doing this in a system that wasn't designed for us. So it's not about rewriting the rules because there are no rules. It's become about rewriting the entire system, for that matter, because you don't need permission anymore. You just need Wi-Fi. You don't need to pitch an idea in a boardroom.
It's feasible for everybody now.
Absolutely, because we've democratized innovation, we've democratized creativity, we've democratized knowledge, for that matter. So the entry to barrier is so low. But of course, it comes with those challenges. But the interesting part is that I've seen so many traditional founders do dance on Reels and TikToks now. So I've seen how founders have also known that they need to build a personal brand. They need to be on social media. So I think there's a little bit to and fro, but we need acceptance on a much wider scale. And Gen Z and Millennials are doing that pretty well.
That's great. So I would like to hear from you, Kupu, especially that you are the global head of Zoho for startups. So I'm sure that you have an interesting insight around Gen Z and their participation and their collaboration to the startup landscape.
Absolutely. So I first want to start with how you look at the definition of young, okay? In this world, these interesting times of evolution and how the whole digital landscape has come into play, I still consider myself young. I'm 42 years old, but I'm 42 years young. It's very interesting to see because in this role that I take care of the Zoho for Startups program globally, there's this intersection of culture. You see innovation from great minds across an interesting age demographics, and then this happens at a different period of time where I see myself on a cusp of a generation that has done certain things in a certain way, like she said, there were unspoken rules, unwritten rules, and now we are looking at a future generation where it's a huge responsibility for people like me, who've seen so much of the past, and we've solved Y2K problem, and then Internet Explorer arrived, and then we are looking at the future, we're talking about ChatGPT. So it always feels like we are arriving. We've never arrived before we settle down and we pull together an entire set of people to adjust with this change and catch up with this thing. The next change has arrived. With this context and the role that I play, it's a very responsible statement you make if you don't say things very contextually. So this generation has a very fearless way of approaching innovation and disruption, and they are empowered by the wisdom, the knowledge, the experience that generation from us and the people before, especially women, as we stand tall on the kind of struggles that the past women generations have had, and privileges. You can coin the word with a deeper meaning, a broader meaning for the next generation. With all of this context, I think it's a lot of fearless innovation coming forward, and why not, when we can empower it with our mentoring, we can adjust the speed of innovation with our wisdom, because one thing is to talk about passion and disrupting, but like they say, with the power comes a huge responsibility. To imagine a future much after we are gone, in 40 years down the lane or 50 years down the lane, I think it's a huge responsibility. It's not just courage that comes with innovation. You have to have compassion. You have to have empathy along with this courage, where you're imagining a future for posterity long after you're walking the earth. So it's important to set aside time from each of our responsibilities to inspire the generation, saying, with all your privilege and exposure and knowledge, take care of the speed in which you're disrupting things, because actions have consequences.
And I think this is about making them realize that there is value to what they're doing, and this value must be ethical, and it must be adding value not only to this person personally, but on a global level. But I would like to come to you, Srijan, and especially with what Shreya was talking about, is that we have a lot of technology today. We have a lot of social media platforms. We have a lot of connectivity we've never had before in the history of mankind. So to what extent do you think that this innovation and this technology and communication is actually making it easier for Gen Z to do something for themselves, to start their own business and to have a career?
So I remember when I started out, you had 56 kbps as the internet connection. Whenever there was a phone call from my dad, my internet used to go down and I used to fight with my parents. Now you have 300 Mbps. That's orders of magnitude higher. You have a supercomputer in your phones. Like I remember my computer, which was Celeron, right? The stark difference has completely changed the landscape. Kids have access. They don't ask anymore. Like back in the day, we used to ask whether we could do something. I have Gen Alpha, not even Gen Z, sending me emails for internships. They want to start working much earlier. They know about ChatGPT. They know what is possible. That they have what I call the TCP IP visa. You go online, start a podcast, bring about change. You go online, work on a crypto firm. I hired someone who had a cat image for most of his social media, but he was an amazing engineer. So we were able to hire people we couldn't even access back then. So the ability to ask questions, the access to informations, and just act on it. This is just an amazing generation to be alive. Be it crypto, be it Gen AI, ChatGPT. I know my nieces now use ChatGPT to answer their assignments. Yes. I don't know how good or bad that is, but they have the ability to do that. I didn't even think about it. So they're very smart.
So they have a mind of their own, and yes, they know how to solve problems now, and AI is making it even easier.
Yep.
So moving to you, Ola, and I would like to ask you, knowing that you actively worked to level the playing field for small businesses, and especially in Nigeria, what unique experiences can you share with us today, and what lessons do you think we have to know about startups and the role of Gen Z when it comes to fostering the innovation around the globe?
Thank you so much for having me. So yes, I've worked with a lot of businesses, and one of the major things that I've found in those businesses is how innovative young people are, especially here in our side of Africa. People bring up because there are a lot of problems, around. You can already tell. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Loud and clear.
Okay. There are a lot of problems around. You can already tell that there are major issues that young people are facing. So of course, the lack of job has helped a lot of startups spring up, you know, in Nigeria. And of course, these problems that are springing up are also, young people are also solving these problems and now thinking on it at a global scale. But the barriers that they have faced majorly is, of course, funding, access to funds. It's quite difficult here for younger people to raise funds, due to reputational issues, due to access to the right kind of investor that fits your portfolio, and all of this. And of course, the support system in the country has been quite, we need a lot of support, especially from the government and of course, governments of other nations who can use their own innovation, their own work and bring it here and help us build up these young people, because there are a lot of very young talented entrepreneurs here in Africa, a lot of very young talented startup founders who are doing great work. I mean, ideas spring up all the time, but however, most of them die. Up to 90% of them die in the first 3 years because they can't access funding, they can't build well enough to be able to reach market fit. So yes, these are some of the barriers that the younger Gen Zs face, and the business that I've worked with, these are the major barriers that they face. Thank you.
That's beautiful. Kupa, I would like to come back to you. To what extent do you think that Gen Z understands the ethical element and impact element, global impact element, whether for their communities, whether globally, of having a startup? To what extent do you think that these elements are integrated into their mentalities when starting a business?
Right, that's a great question, May. In fact, keeping in mind the time, I'm going to restrict my answer to a few points. To shift the spotlight on Gen Z and to ask questions that bring about responses from us, from a generation like us, it's a huge responsibility once again. So in terms of ethics, in terms of how the Gen Z look at, bringing a startup into life, I think they need a lot of active mentoring. I come from, I'll tell you my viewpoint and the perspective. I'm a microbiologist turned copy editor, turned trainer, turned technologist. And the generation that I worked with were workplace and loyalty and what you're trying to do, the whole perspective has changed right now to what we're looking at Gen Z or Gen Alpha. But keeping all of this in mind, I think it's up to us, because when you bring a disruption, it's important to understand the history, the culture, the kind of people it's going to impact, not just in terms of economy. There's a lot of psychological, emotional, futuristic disruption that you're talking about. And how long will we just keep talking about a change that's not going to really factor into the people who are remotely going to get affected, how long it's going to catch up. So it's a very wholesome perspective where I think speed is an important factor along with ethics that we talk about. When one side of the spectrum we talk about disruption, change, ROIs and all of that, and there is an important spectrum where we still talk about catching up. So it's totally up to the generation before that to influence the Gen Z or the Gen Alpha to think about ethics. Because nobody, take ChatGPT for example, nobody knew that it's going to arrive. We are still figuring out the various ramifications of who's feeding these machines about artificial intelligence, who's leading. So we're still, I would say, in a very rudimentary stage, like Dr. Soundarya Rajesh talked about and various others, to eliminate bias, to talk about ethics in a most acceptable manner, not just a decided few who write these rules and regulations. So it's a long way to go.
And Shreya, I think that when I look at social media platforms, this generation is really into discussing these topics.
Yeah.
To what extent do you see it? I mean, with your podcast and with your interaction with this generation, to what extent do you see that this is something they prioritize?
Social media?
No, I mean, talking about the impact in an ethical and the social impact of what they're doing.
Yeah, I think you can see social media as either a megaphone for amplifying what we do and current social issues, but it's also a double-edged sword at the same time. There's so many movements that have gained traction in social media. You're talking about climate crisis, you're talking about human rights issues. There's so much out there. So sure, it's helped us build awareness, it's helped us build communities, it's helped us mobilize action. But at the same time, people like us who are in the social justice movement, we have massive empathy fatigue. There's so many things that we care about and they're so intersectional. Me, for example, like I started off in the gender equity space, then I moved on to sustainability, and there's so many dimensions even within that. And then to talk about human rights, I'm very vocal about the genocide that's happening at the moment. I also care about the animal rights movements. Of course, there are intersecting issues and injustices and oppression happening at the same time, but it's helped us in a way, but it's also not, because we're trying to stay away from burnout and paralysis. But the privilege that it's given me and the next gen is I get to decide what I get to spend my energy on. I don't need to ask like, hey, does profit come before impact? I get to do both at the same time. I get to ask myself, what are my values? What do I prioritize? Where do my ethics lie? And can I build a business out of that? And technology has given me the privilege to do that. So I get to ask really different questions than what my parents did and what my dad did. It doesn't come out of necessity, it comes out of intention.
And I think it's beautiful that we get to hear fresh views about these topics, views that are new to us, as I consider myself an older generation. So let me ask you both, Srijan and Ola, being recognized on Forbes Africa's under 30 list is a significant achievement. So to what extent did that open doors for change, please?
So I think, firstly, it is a very stark reminder of how old I am. So that's the funny part. But it's more of a reflection of what you've done than what you're going to do. So it's a reflection of the fact that you build a business. You get the Forbes 30 under 30 because you've achieved something to that stage. I tend to take it lightly. There is much more responsibility in what I'm building as a business. I think both of you have already mentioned how you need to be ethical, how you need to get impact. One of our major things is making sure that we can make payments available for everyone. That's one of the missions of Fuze. So it does open doors. It makes it easy to talk to investors. They do give you some bit of ownership and responsibility. They take you seriously. But sometimes it's a problem when you're young. I think over to Ola.
That's beautiful. Ola, I would like to hear your thoughts on the topic as well.
Oh, yes. Being on Forbes 30 under 30 was quite inspirational for us, or for me, because at the time when I got it, I come from a very small or a very rural part of Nigeria. And I grew up there, and it's like suburban, not rural, but suburban, not urban either, you understand? And I was just persistent, and I kept working. I kept, doing what I could do, trying to inspire the younger people around me. So getting on Forbes 30 under 30 was such an inspiration to so many young people around me at the time, because it helped them see that no matter where you come from, you can actually aspire and you can do well enough for you to be recognized. And at the time, Forbes had moved from choosing 120 people per year to choosing just 30 per year in Africa. There was so much more inspirational that younger people wanted to, actually look up to awards like this or recognitions like this and build better products. And of course, this opened up a lot of opportunities, speaking engagements opportunities, funding opportunities, and of course, innovation, came in. So yes, it was quite significant for me that I got into Forbes under 30 under 30, even though there's also a downside to it, because people actually expect much more from me. There's much more pressure, you understand, but I just tend to focus on the positive and just, build as I grow. Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us online, and keep inspiring and keep aiming for value creation. And thank you for my speakers as well here for joining us at IGF this year. Thank you so much.